I hate to just say Wonder Woman, but Jill has been doing incredible things. She's been doing her job and everybody else's too. She is our Associate Director of Music, but she's so much more than just that. And so she's going to play today. I think somebody said maybe the organ's sad about Andrew not being here because it's feeling a little bit, it's ailing just a little bit itself. And we decided to present you with beautiful piano literature, romantic and impressionist, I think. Is that right? Am I missing? That's pretty much it, right? Okay. Today we have Jennifer Reed Hawthorne. She is not just a poet. She is the author-editor of 8 books, including #1 New York Times bestsellers, Chicken Soup for the Woman's Soul and Chicken Soup for the Mother's Soul. And together, her books have sold more than 14 million copies. Yes. She lives in Vero. And how long have you been in Vero? Quite a while now?
16 years.
16? She's a Veroite. She's here with her life partner, Elizabeth, who is also here. I'm reading all this from her first book of poetry, of which she has some copies. And that's enough. Come up and, both of you, come up and do your stuff.
Oh, Sean, thank you so much. And thank you so much for inviting me to be a part of this beautiful poetry music series. I've just loved coming to most of the events this season, and they've just been so beautiful. And Jill Truax, I cannot thank you enough for filling in today. Jill has got 4 exquisite pieces prepared for us, and I know that it's going to really, really make a difference in this event for all of us. I lost someone very dear to me yesterday, and I would like to dedicate my reading this morning to Daniel Arthur Hawthorne. And I would like to wish all of you a very happy spring. You know, as I look out at you, I'm reminded of something that my father told me. He said that when I was 7 or 8 years old, I used to love to gather up all the children in my neighborhood and make them sit in rows on the driveway so that I could talk to them. I could not have imagined that 7 decades later, people would still sit in rows to hear me talk. But let me just say that it is a great honor, and I'm extremely grateful for your presence this morning. Whether it's talking or writing, I love language. I love words. I love all of the different ways that we can use words, the different purposes for which we use words, and particularly the attempt to use words to capture the ineffable or the essence of an experience, which I think poetry is so fantastic at doing. But I came quite late in life to poetry. I think that the first writing that I did outside the classroom was in the 5th grade when I wrote a letter to the editor of my elementary school paper. By the time I was in the 8th grade, I was writing speeches and entering local, regional, and statewide speaking contests. At college, at LSU, I majored in journalism. And then later, I got a job as a technical writer, mostly writing software training manuals for big corporations like AMC Theaters. And from there, I actually went on to establish my own training business and taught business writing and technical writing in the corporate world. I then decided that I needed to get back to my roots and what I had loved doing as a child, and I established my own speaking business. I wanted to give inspirational talks, especially to groups of women, and that really had a chance to blossom once I got involved with the Chicken Soup for the Soul books. That was a marvelous opportunity and blessing for me. I got to work with one of my favorite writing genres, the inspirational story. And then concurrent with that part of my career, I continued giving keynote inspirational talks all over the country and sometimes in other countries as well. And I want to tell you a story about one of those. I was in New York City on the first anniversary of 9/11 to give a keynote address. And I went in to the city a day early so that I could go to a Broadway play. And when I got out that night, I was just elated. I had just scored a ticket to the hottest show in town. It was The Producers with Nathan Lane and Matthew Broderick, and I just felt so happy. And I decided that I was going to walk back to my hotel, and in order to do that, I had to walk through Times Square. Well, I've always loved Times Square, but as I walked, the happiness, the elation that I was experiencing just grew and grew. The people, the lights, the electricity of that place, the vitality, the happiness of the people. And I just thought, oh my gosh, I wish I could bottle this experience. I wish I could capture this experience somehow. And the next thought I had was, oh, well, you would have to write a poem to be able to do that. Now, I have no idea where that thought came from, but when I got back to Fairfield, Iowa, where I was living, I found a poetry teacher, and I began to study the art of poetry. And that is the name of the first poem that I'd like to read to you. This is a poem written after I read Ars Poetica Bronx by Mary E. Cronin. Ars Poetica means the art of poetry, and my poem is called Ars Poetica Baton Rouge. That was my hometown. It was the strangers at the kitchen table, other English women my mother met in line at the post office and brought home for tea in the Royal Doulton cups, stories of sirens and blackout curtains. It was daylilies in the garden, new-mown grass cooling hot bare feet, Swan Lake and La Traviata on the stereo, the whoosh of the attic fan sucking air through the open window over my bed, billowing the curtain above my face on a scorching summer night. It was politics and the AFL-CIO, 5 black students escorted by police in the 11th grade to our Confederacy-loving school. It was bedtime Brewer Rabbit stories from our father as he sat on the floor between our twin beds. It was the magnolia and the mimosa tree that made me a poet. About 10 years ago, I started studying poetry with a wonderful woman named Diane Frank, who is a beautiful poet and author. She's a novelist and founder of Blue Light Press, which publishes many poets, including some very well-known names that you would probably recognize. And I do about 3 to 4 online workshops with her every year. And over these years, we have developed a very beautiful group. The group that I'm in is a real, what I would describe as a sisterhood of poets, and we love watching each other's poems evolve over time. But back in the beginning days, I sometimes felt extremely insecure when I compared myself to some of the other women in the group. I felt that they were somehow a little more poetic than I was. Their poetry was a little more abstract, and my style of writing has always been to be extremely conversational. So I talked to Diane about it one day, and my concerns, that I just kind of wasn't living up to other people in the group. And she said, Jennifer, read Billy Collins. Now, you all know who Billy Collins is. He was the Poet Laureate of the United States, 2001 to 2003. I immediately got some of his books and fell in love with his very linear style of writing poetry. I took his master class online, and then, as many of you know, Billy Collins stood at this podium back in November, thanks to Sean, and gave us an incredible reading. Were any of you able to attend that? Oh, it was such an extraordinary night. And after that night, I wrote this poem, Meeting Billy Collins. When the poet laureate said he didn't care much for autobiographical poems, I cringed, knowing he would cringe at much of my poetry. But isn't all poetry autobiographical? When Billy tells us that the trouble with poetry is that it just spawns the need to write more poetry, that he's always thinking about poetry, and that he, as poet, likes to disappear at the end of a poem he's writing, isn't he drawing back the curtains, opening the window and inviting us into his soul? You say you want to know me? My poems will tell you everything. In the stories of my life, you will find me, beneath the words and in between, in the essence that underlies all story. One of the things that poetry has really helped me realize is what the major themes of my life have been and are. And one of those was the fact that I had a very beautiful childhood growing up in the Deep South, in Louisiana. And I've written quite a few poems about this. I don't think I ever realized how happy my childhood was until I started writing poetry. And I think that one of the things that I am most grateful for in life is the fact that when I was a child, which I think is probably the case for many of you, we did not have devices. I have 4 grandchildren, ages 3 to 11, and every one of them, except for the 3-year-old, has his own tablet. For me, in place of devices, I had grass, clover, and the mimosa tree. And the name of this poem is called Close to the Ground. We children lived close to the ground. We noticed mud and fire ants, low-hanging nests, fairies on toadstools. The earth was our lover. We rolled in the velvety ryegrass, somersaulting, cartwheeling our way through summer. We sat in the clover, wove white-pink blossoms into crowns for our princess heads. We drew hopscotch grids in charcoal on the driveway, jump, straddle, our feet dropping into the hollow spaces. We resisted our mother's call at dusk, pleading for just one more dance with winking fireflies around the bridal wreath. And when at night we fell asleep and dreams lifted us, we were unafraid to leave the ground, still covered in green and the smell of the sacred earth. Okay, Jill. Oh, that was beautiful, Jill. Thank you. Which piece was that?
That was Haydn.
That was Haydn. Very beautiful. You know, I have found traveling to be a wonderfully expanding experience, and I've had the good fortune of being able to do quite a lot of it, particularly earlier in my life. But most recently, last summer, Lily and I went to Italy, and I have to tell you, it was just one of the worst experiences we've ever had. You know, I wish we could say, oh, it was just so fantastic, the trip of a lifetime. But no, the travel was a nightmare, and we both got so sick, sort of like for the first time in decades. But I'm telling you, if you're going to be sick, Paradise is a really good place for that to happen. And we went for a writing retreat, and we had been put up, just totally unexpectedly, in this exquisite luxury resort villa called La Villa Aurelia. And I'm going to read you first two poems that I wrote sort of about experiences before I went to bed and couldn't write anymore, and then a third poem about an experience that happened quite some time ago. So this is my poem about La Villa Aurelia. And there's one word in here that I want to give you a heads up about. It's called tufa. And tufa is a type of limestone that's made from volcanic material. It's often found near hot springs, and it's widely seen in the area of the Bay of Naples, Italy, which is where we were. I dream in blues and whites, blue sky, blue sea, blue walls, hand-painted tiles with blue flourishes on polished white floors. White boats by the hundreds on the Bay of Naples, streaks of white wake behind them. White Lego villages on the hillsides, clothes drying on a rack in the white sun. I disappear into crisp white sheets, finger the raised pattern of the cotton jacquard coverlet, white on white. Other colors too, creams and grays, the yellow tufa of the ancient mountains, temples, Roman walls. Espresso, not just the coffee, but the color of the young men's hair. Golden browns, the color of crust on Italian bread. Honey browns, the color of the young women's skin. But it's the blues and whites that stop me. Colors of the Mediterranean, colors of this living dream. Traveling is also a wonderful source of stories, and one day on our trip, we climbed and climbed to see some ancient Roman ruins. And this poem is called Dust of the Ancients. The city in this poem is called Cuma, and Cuma is an ancient city, I mean really ancient, overlooking both the Mediterranean on one side and the Bay of Naples on the other. Dust of the Ancients. My feet were caked with ancient dust by the time we got back to the villa. The same volcanic soul that clung to the feet of early Greeks and Romans as they climbed to the Temple of Apollo, high above the city of Cuma. I had felt like a character in the Aeneid, the ghost of Virgil pushing me up to the summit of the mountain, to the temple ruins, where I looked through the eyes of the ancients at a green land with sunlit lakes and bays, white cliffs and midnight sea, towering Mount Vesuvius, blue-gray in the distance. Then the cave of Cybele, where the line between myth and reality began to blur. A long stone corridor led me to a cavern of semi-darkness where 2,000 years ago, emperors knelt before the oracle of Apollo. "Are you still here?" I whispered, but all I heard was the silence of the stones. Back at the villa, a stone jug in the courtyard filled with rainwater. I poured it over my hot, swollen feet, washed away the dust, the myths, the memories, and any notion of needing an oracle other than myself. That was a prose poem, which, of course, is a poem written in paragraphs, which I find to be extremely a wonderful format for telling stories. Now, I'd like to read one more story poem to you. This is about something that happened quite a long time ago. I was in the Peace Corps in my early 20s in West Africa, and my two best friends from college were also in the Peace Corps, one in Western Samoa and one in Nairobi, Kenya. And we came from different parts of the world and converged on our friend Karen's apartment in Nairobi. And that summer, we had the most marvelous time touring the game parks of Kenya and Tanzania. And this is about an experience that I had at the top of the Ngorongoro crater, which is in Tanzania. It is a massive crater, with a basin with thousands of animals in it. And this is a poem I wrote about the Ngorongoro crater. Now keep in mind that we were very young and very foolish, okay? We pitched our tent right under the sign that read, "No camping on the rim of the crater." 2,000 feet up on the crater's ledge, perched at the edge of night. Cold and exhausted, the four of us settled quickly in our sleeping bags. We were used to hard ground, the sounds of the Serengeti. Hungry for wildness, we had spent the day zigzagging down the crater wall in the Land Rover, then flying through the crater basin in dizzying loops, like the patterns on the zebras we scattered by the thousands. We ran with herds across the savannah, reedbuck, waterbuck, klipspringers, kudu, wildebeest, hartebeest, oryx, and impala. But it was different with the elephants and giraffes and the lions that often lay across the road. Their benediction stopped us in our tracks. Sleep was impossible, the cold chilling my bones, the roar of lions too close. Desperate for warmth, I slipped out of the tent into the rover's back seat, scanning the African sky for any hint of morning. Suddenly, in the equator's half-light, the sound of tapping. Two pairs of eyes watching me. I bolted upright. The two men carried spears. Leather thongs circled red-throated necks. Ochre hair fell wild and long in plaited cornrows. I moved my face closer to the glass. Tall and thin, the half-naked men wore the dark, shining skin of a long-ago people. Crimson cloth thrown easily around their shoulders, painted legs, red-smeared arms, beaded earrings, bracelets, headbands dripping from their bodies. They shone red and copper, reflected in the light of their tall spears, still tapping against the window. I pressed my fear down, unlocked the door, and slowly climbed into the cold morning. I smelled dung and sweat, sour milk, the cattle's blood they carried in their gourds. I choked back the rising nausea. But I did not call to the tent. I stood and met the Maasai. Then soundlessly, as they had come, they turned and walked away, two spots of blood pulsing against the sky.
The next piece is going to be by Chopin. It's his Nocturne in E minor.
gosh, Jill, that was so beautiful. Thank you. In my career as an author, editor with the Chicken Soup for the Soul books, and keynote speaker, I led an extremely fast-paced, intense, over-the-top life at times. And so the last few years, I have really been trying to wind down from that. And I think I'm doing a fairly good job at it, but this poem is, I wrote fairly recently, and it really describes sort of where I am right now. It's called Winter Woman. And then there's an epigraph by Patricia Monahan at the beginning, which says, "When winter comes to a woman's soul, she may say she is resting, but she is more than resting. She is creating a new universe within herself. It may look as if I'm doing nothing, but don't be fooled. It takes great effort to be still, to shake the muscle memory of running through airports, to stop adrenaline in its tracks, to relax the grip on life I held so tightly for so long. Winter has come to my soul, but the cave I enter is not for hibernating. It's a place to practice letting go. I dismantle my office, no longer the center of my universe. Shred the bucket list. Pass ancestral linens to the family daughters, blessings of the grandmothers embroidered into every flower. I shed books, antiques, family silver, and tears as I send them on to their new homes. What's left feels quiet, relaxed, weightless. It has a voice that whispers, "Welcome to the unknown. Welcome to the mystery. You're going to love it here." And then this poem is called We're Talking About, oh, thank you. Thank you. We're talking about God. We're talking about God. My friend says she knows God is in everything. She just can't feel it. As I try to think of some deep and wise response, my body remembers the way my bed held me last night. Soft sheets, cotton blanket. I note the pink bloom heavy hibiscus outside, and beyond it, the pine trees are singing. Flashback to this morning's breakfast. Toast smothered in real butter and blackcurrant jam. What is this if not divinity? And now I'm on the phone with this dear friend who unfailingly calls me on my birthday from wherever she is in the world, a vessel of God's love pouring into me and talking about not being able to feel God. Just notice, I say finally, as warmth spreads through my chest and invisible hands cool the tiles beneath my feet in the hot tropical sun.
The next piece is a Beethoven First Movement Sonata, and he wrote a series of most Beethoven sonatas, even the first movements are quite long. We'd be here for 20 minutes. But he wrote a series of very small ones. So this one, her first poem about trying to slow down, well, that's how this piece, I've tried to slow down, but the fingers just won't.
gosh, aren't we so fortunate to have Jill here with us this morning? Oh, that's so amazing. Yes. We are coming to the end of our program this morning, and I would like to just read 2 more poems for you before Jill finishes with her final piece. This is something that happened about 5 years ago. I was getting ready to have surgery, and there was really quite a lot of risk to it, and I was really quite nervous about it. And then I was given a very beautiful vision, and I wrote a poem about it and would like to share that with you. This poem is called Surgical Vision. She filled me with her blue diamond essence, promised protection. I will be at your head, my son, the Christ, at your feet. She introduced my celestial guardians, Lethusia standing on my left in raiment of dawn, blue-edged in navy, Anna May to my right in light-suffused rose. Large angels, she added. Saint Germain will be your surgeon, and at my request, Archangel Raphael will hold us all in the healing of sacred time and space. She was right about all of it. Not even the veil of anesthesia could block the grace of these light beings from permeating my body and soul. They came and have not left. Oh, gosh, you all are so wonderful. Thank you. And this will be my final poem. It's about something that also happened about 5 years ago on Easter morning. The Candace referred to in this poem was one of Lily's and my dearest friends on earth. She just passed away a couple of years ago. But this day was so special for many reasons, one of which was that I got to meet her mother that day. And her mother, you may recognize the name Jan Karen. She's an internationally known best-selling author of the Mitford series. And Jan became quite a mentor to me. I got a chance to read some of my poems to her later that day on Easter Sunday, and she really just kind of flipped out over them, and at least 10 times before I left that day said, Jennifer, you have to publish your poems. And that is really how Life is a Prayer, my first book of poems, came to be. I'm so grateful for her, and Lily and I are so fortunate to still be in touch with Jan. So this is called Easter Morning on Black Mountain. We were thinking of going to church, but first had to stick our noses out Candace's front door to see if our Florida blood could meet the demands of cold mountain air, chilled bones. The first rays of sunlight, but there, on the porch, a small square package. Wrapped in plain pink paper, 2 fuchsia azaleas scotch-taped to the top. Rose, Candace said, and showed us a photo of her young friend, the mountain girl who lived next door, just back from a family trip to the Carolina shore. Inside the box, 4 shells, a calico scallop, a sundial, and a marsh periwinkle, neatly stacked and covered by the copper-colored back of a horseshoe crab. I pictured the clear-eyed shell seeker reaching down to examine a moon snail, while other 12-year-olds clutched their phones, felt a surge of hope. Goodness, gentleness, and love in a little pink box, a perfect sermon for Easter morning on Black Mountain.
The final piece is from WC's Suite Bergamasque. You probably know the most famous suite from this piece from this suite, and that would be Clair de Lune. But what is not performed as much is the other 3 movements, and the first one is a prelude. with lots and lots of different emotions in the piece, going from dynamic beginning to very mystical, much like the visions. And then ending again and big, as if on top of a mountain. Okay, so enjoy the Sweetberger Mass Prelude.
Thank you all so much for being here today. We really, really appreciate it.